For as long as people could remember, the story of the missing human fleet was told in hushed voices across the galaxy. It was a mystery that had no answers, only questions that grew deeper with every passing generation. Some called it a legend, others called it a tragedy. But for those who lived during its time, it was a wound that never healed. It began decades ago, when humanity was at the peak of its power. Their ships ruled the stars, and their colonies spread across hundreds of worlds. The fleet that disappeared was known as the Vanguard Armada. It was humanity's pride, the strongest and most advanced fleet ever built. Thousands of men and women had left their homes to join it, believing they were serving a greater purpose. They were explorers, soldiers, and scientists, all united under one banner. Their mission was simple at first: to investigate a strange signal that had appeared at the edge of the galaxy, a signal unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. The signal was faint, ancient, and filled with patterns no one could understand. Some thought it was just cosmic noise, others believed it came from an unknown civilization. Whatever it was, it stirred something deep inside people. The possibility that humanity was not alone in the vastness of space was both thrilling and terrifying. And so, when the Vanguard Armada set out to find the source, people everywhere watched in awe and hope. Days turned into weeks, then months. The fleet continued sending updates, images of beautiful, untouched star systems, recordings of strange radio waves, and mysterious readings that made scientists restless with curiosity. Then suddenly the messages stopped. At first, everyone thought it was just a communication failure. Space was unpredictable after all. But as time passed, hope began to fade. The fleet never responded, not a single ship. No emergency beacon, no distress signal, just silence. Humanity waited for years, sending search teams and signal probes into the dark. Nothing came back. Eventually, the story of the Vanguard Armada became just that: a story. Families of those who had served aboard the fleet were left with empty homes and unanswered questions. Children grew up not knowing what truly happened to their parents or siblings. Monuments were built on Earth and other human colonies, honoring the lost souls who had vanished among the stars. For a while, those monuments gave people comfort. But as the decades rolled on, even the pain of loss began to blur into the background of everyday life. Still, not everyone forgot. There were always a few who believed the Vanguard Armada hadn't been destroyed. Some said they were trapped beyond known space. Others whispered about darker possibilities, that the fleet had found something humanity was never meant to find. But there was no proof, only stories told by old veterans and researchers obsessed with the unknown. And then one quiet morning, everything changed. A young astronomer working on a deep space observatory noticed something strange. There was a small shift in gravitational patterns near a distant star system. Something massive was moving, yet invisible to ordinary sensors. When the data was checked again, it showed that the moving mass was far too large to be an asteroid or planet. In fact, it was multiple objects, each bigger than anything humans had ever built. The readings were confusing, even frightening. Whatever those objects were, they were coming closer to the edge of known space. At first, scientists thought it might be a natural phenomenon, maybe a cluster of rogue planets caught in a gravitational field. But as more observatories confirmed the movement, a strange detail emerged. The signals coming from the objects carried faint traces of human technology. No one wanted to believe it. How could human-made signals be coming from objects larger than planets? The research teams double-checked every reading, convinced it was an error. But it wasn't. Something or someone was returning. Within days, the entire scientific community was talking about it. Governments grew silent, military fleets were put on alert, and the media began to spread rumors. Some claimed it was a lost alien civilization. Others said it was the Vanguard Armada, finally coming home after all these years. Most people dismissed it as nonsense, but deep down, humanity felt the same cold shiver. The memories of the lost fleet were being stirred once again. Weeks later, long-range telescopes caught their first real glimpse. Massive shapes drifted out of the darkness, shapes that defied understanding. Each one was enormous, larger than any known structure. Their outlines were faint, covered in what looked like glowing mist or energy fields. And as the light from nearby stars reflected off their surfaces, something incredible became clear. These were not planets. They were ships, at least a dozen of them. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Across every human colony, people stared at the images being broadcasted. The same question echoed everywhere. Had the Vanguard Armada really returned? But if these were indeed human ships, something was very wrong. Their appearance was unnatural. The hulls were no longer smooth metal. They pulsed faintly like the skin of a living creature. Strange patterns moved across them, as if the ships themselves were breathing. Their original designs were gone, replaced with structures that twisted and changed shape slowly, like liquid metal responding to invisible forces. The first official reports were cautious. No one dared to call them human ships yet. But deep scans revealed unmistakable human-made components buried deep inside those massive structures. Old reactor cores, data nodes, even fragments of known identification codes. Somehow, human technology had become part of something much bigger, something beyond human design. Governments held emergency meetings. Military leaders debated whether to approach or stay away. Civilian populations panicked. Old families of the lost crew members watched in silence, torn between hope and fear. Could their loved ones still be alive after all these years? Or had they become part of something else entirely? As the objects drew nearer, communication satellites picked up something unexpected, a low rhythmic signal. It wasn't random. It followed a precise pattern. When decoded, it revealed a simple but chilling message. We are home. The words spread like wildfire. The galaxy that had once moved on from the mystery of the missing fleet now stood still once more. Everyone waited, breathless, watching as the Titanic warships continued their slow, steady journey toward human space. But deep inside, fear began to grow. If the fleet had truly returned after so many decades, what had they seen out there? What had they become? And why did their ships now look like something alive? No one had the answers. Not yet. In the silence of the stars, the massive shapes kept drifting closer, casting shadows across the void, shadows larger than worlds themselves. Humanity had once believed the Vanguard Armada was lost to the darkness. Now that same darkness was bringing them back. But as the first faint signals continued to pulse across the galaxy, one thing became painfully clear. Whatever had taken them, whatever they had found, had changed them forever. And soon, the rest of humanity was going to find out just how much. The news spread faster than light itself. Across human space, from the smallest mining colonies to the great floating cities above Earth, people couldn't stop talking about the giant shapes now approaching known territory. Every screen showed those blurry images, massive dark forms surrounded by a faint blue glow. Scientists were calling them anomalies, but most people had already given them a different name. They called them the Returners. At first, nobody was sure what to believe. Some thought it was a government trick or a hoax. Others said these things were not ships at all, but new planets born from strange cosmic storms. But then new images arrived. Real, clear, undeniable. And there it was. The familiar shape of a human warship buried beneath layers of alien-looking material. On the surface, symbols glowed in patterns that no one could read. Yet the ship's core structure was still visible, twisted but still recognizable. The design matched perfectly with the records of one of the ships from the lost Vanguard Armada. It was no longer a rumor. It was real. The lost fleet had returned. Governments around the galaxy were thrown into chaos. Meetings ran day and night. Messages flew between worlds, and every leader demanded answers. The United Earth Command held an emergency broadcast. The spokesperson tried to stay calm, reading from a statement that was carefully written but filled with uncertainty. They confirmed that 12 massive objects had entered the outer rim of human space. They admitted that the readings showed human-made technology inside them. But they also warned that the fleet seemed changed. Their size was beyond imagination. The smallest of the returning ships was nearly the size of Earth's moon. The largest one dwarfed entire planets. Yet somehow they moved smoothly and silently through the void, not disturbing any gravitational balance. Their engines emitted no heat, no light, no trace of fuel. It was as if they floated on invisible waves of power that humans could not understand. Scientists tried everything to study them: radio scans, deep-wave signals, energy probes. But the ships gave nothing away. Whenever a probe got close, it simply lost power and drifted away, dead in space. And yet the giant ships kept moving, slow but steady, directly toward human worlds. People began to panic. Some thought the ships were hostile. Old fears came alive. The idea that the fleet had been corrupted, that maybe they were no longer human. Some even believed the ships carried an alien infection, something that had taken control of human minds and machines. Others, especially families of the long-lost crew, refused to accept such ideas. They clung to hope. Maybe, they said, the fleet had found something amazing, knowledge or technology that could change everything. The truth was, no one knew what to think. Meanwhile, deep space observatories kept watching. Late one night, a faint light appeared near the edge of one of the massive ships. It flickered like a heartbeat. Then another light appeared, and another. Soon the entire surface of the colossal structure began to pulse rhythmically, glowing brighter with each wave. The pattern wasn't random. It followed a code. Engineers and linguists worked for days trying to decode it. Finally, they found something. Hidden in the pattern was a signal, a message written in an ancient human transmission format used by the military decades ago. The signal carried 3 simple words: "We are human." That was the moment everything changed again. The message spread like wildfire. Reporters cried on air. Families fell to their knees in disbelief. People who had lost all hope suddenly had it again. The governments that had prepared for war now hesitated. It seemed impossible. But if the message was true, the people inside those ships were human, or at least they once were. The following days were filled with tension. The fleet kept advancing, but it never attacked, never responded to calls. It just moved in silence, heading toward the center of human space. The largest of the ships finally slowed down near a barren system, where it stopped completely. The others formed a ring around it, almost like a formation humans used in the old days of space travel. The United Earth Command decided it was time to make contact. A small, unarmed research vessel was chosen for the mission. It was manned by a group of scientists and communication experts. As the ship approached one of the massive structures, every human colony tuned in to watch the live broadcast. The crew on the research vessel spoke softly, almost whispering as if afraid to disturb something ancient. The closer they got, the more unbelievable the view became. The surface of the giant ship looked alive. It wasn't metal anymore. It seemed to flow and shimmer like liquid moving in slow patterns. Strange veins of light ran beneath the surface, glowing and fading like breath. The crew could see what looked like towers, spires, and ridges shifting slowly as if the ship was growing or repairing itself. When the vessel reached communication range, the captain sent a standard greeting signal. No response. They tried again. Still nothing. The silence stretched for long, tense minutes. And then, without warning, the lights inside the massive structure flared. A deep vibration passed through the smaller ship, shaking it slightly. Then a voice echoed through their communication system. It was soft, broken, almost human, but distorted, as if passing through layers of static and time. The voice said only a few words. "Do not be afraid." The crew froze. The captain asked who they were. For a moment there was only silence again. Then the voice spoke once more, quieter this time, as if it carried a heavy burden. "We are what remains." The transmission ended. Every listening post across the galaxy recorded that moment. Experts replayed the message again and again, trying to understand what it meant. Some said it was a warning. Others believed it was a cry for help. But one thing was certain. The voice belonged to a human. Within hours, energy readings around the giant ships began to change. They emitted faint waves of power that spread across nearby space, harmless but clearly controlled. It was as if the ships were adjusting their systems to avoid harming the smaller human vessels around them. That small act gave people hope again. Maybe these beings hadn't returned as enemies. Maybe they wanted to come home. But as more data came in, something darker began to emerge. Scans showed that inside the ships there were no separate human life forms, at least none that sensors could detect. The life signs seemed fused with the structure itself. Whatever humans remained aboard had somehow become part of the ships. When this news reached the public, confusion turned into fear. How could humans become one with machines? Some said it was a curse of the void. Others called it evolution. Religious groups began preaching that the fleet had entered the realm of the divine and returned as messengers. Scientists disagreed, saying there had to be a logical explanation. Some advanced technology that merged living cells with synthetic matter. Still, no one could explain how those people had survived for so many decades without food, air, or water, or how they had grown ships larger than planets. The more humanity looked, the less sense it made. One thing, however, was clear. The returning fleet was far beyond human understanding. They moved with purpose, almost graceful in the darkness, like living giants returning from another universe. And though no one could hear their thoughts, there was something hauntingly human about their silence, as if they carried memories too heavy to speak of. On one broadcast, a scientist said something that stayed with people long after. They went further than anyone ever has. We can't expect them to come back the same. That single sentence summed up what many secretly feared. Maybe the fleet had survived, but they were no longer entirely human. Still, they hadn't attacked, hadn't destroyed, hadn't even demanded anything. They just came home. As the weeks passed, more ships appeared at the edges of the galaxy. The count rose from 12 to 15, then 20. Each one seemed connected to the others by invisible energy lines, moving together as though they shared a single mind. Humanity watched in silence, torn between wonder and dread. Somewhere out there, within those massive glowing walls, were the last echoes of the Vanguard Armada, the brave souls who had once left in search of knowledge and never returned. Now they were back, changed beyond recognition and yet still carrying a human message. We are home. But even as the message spread across every world, a quiet unease began to grow. Because deep down everyone knew that if they had truly come home, something else might have followed them. And whatever it was still out there, waiting. The galaxy had never felt so quiet. Every signal, every channel, every news broadcast was filled with the same images. Those massive ships still hanging motionless in space. They hadn't moved in days, and yet their presence was impossible to ignore. It was as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for whatever would happen next. After the strange voice said those haunting words, "We are what remains," no one had heard anything again. The signal stopped. The glowing lights on the ships dimmed slightly, but they didn't fade away. They stayed there, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat, just bright enough to remind everyone that they were still alive, still watching. People on different worlds reacted differently. Some saw it as a miracle, proof that humans could survive anything. Others were afraid, whispering that these were not survivors at all, but something else pretending to be human. Scientists, soldiers, and diplomats all argued over what to do next. Should they reach out again? Or should they stay silent and watch? Finally, a decision was made. Humanity would try to make contact one more time, but this time, not from afar. The United Earth Command authorized a manned expedition to physically board one of the giant ships. It was a dangerous mission, and everyone knew it. The last time a vessel approached, strange energy readings had nearly disabled it. But the command believed it was the only way to know the truth. A small crew was chosen, trained and prepared for what could be the most important encounter in human history. The ship they used was tiny compared to the giant they were approaching. As it drew near, the enormous structure filled the entire viewing screen, an endless wall of metal and living light. It was so large that even the cameras couldn't capture it all in one frame. The surface looked like a mix of metal and flesh, smooth in some areas, rough and cracked in others. It was like looking at something alive and asleep at the same time. They scanned for entry points, hoping to find a docking bay or an airlock, but the outer hull seemed sealed. Then, without warning, a soft blue circle appeared on the surface. It was the same color as the old human ship lights. The circle widened slowly, forming what looked like an opening. The crew hesitated. Was it an invitation or a trap? The captain gave the order to proceed. As the smaller vessel entered the glowing circle, its sensors began to flicker. For a few seconds, all readings went blank. Then the light faded, and they found themselves inside a massive chamber. It was quiet still and impossibly vast. The walls shimmered faintly with moving patterns of light, like waves rolling across water. The interior was nothing like any human ship ever built. It felt organic. They sent a signal to the command center back home. "We've entered." The ship seemed stable. Then they began to explore. Every step they took echoed softly, though there was no sound of metal underfoot. The floor felt solid but flexible, like walking on something that adjusted to their weight. Along the walls were structures that looked almost like veins, glowing faintly with a pulsing rhythm. It reminded them of the heartbeat pattern seen from the outside. As they moved deeper, they found what appeared to be corridors and rooms, but everything was shaped strangely, as if the ship had grown rather than been built. In some places, they saw parts that were definitely human-made. Old metal panels, pieces of broken consoles, even fragments of control screens. But they were fused into the organic material as if swallowed by it. The deeper they went, the more the atmosphere changed. A faint hum filled the air, not mechanical, but something else, almost like a song without words. It felt familiar yet alien at the same time. Then they reached a massive door at the center of the ship. It wasn't really a door, more like a thick wall that slowly melted away as they approached. Beyond it lay a huge chamber, dark except for a dim light shining from a single figure. At first they thought it was a hologram. A tall, shadowed human shape stood in the center of the room. When they stepped closer, the shape lifted its head and looked at them. "Who are you?" the captain asked softly. There was a long silence. Then the same broken voice from before filled the chamber. It was clearer now, less distorted. "We are the Vanguard," the voice said. "We were." The crew exchanged stunned looks. They asked what had happened, where they had been all these years. The voice paused before answering, as if searching for the right words. "We followed the signal," it said. "It called to us from beyond the edge. We thought it was life. We thought it was knowledge. But we found something else. Something that does not live or die. It changes all who come close." The lights in the room dimmed and strange images appeared in the air around them. Memories, perhaps, or projections. They saw flashes of the original fleet traveling through endless black space, then bright bursts of light, storms of energy that tore through ships. They saw figures, human, terrified, trapped inside glowing structures, their faces frozen between fear and wonder. Then the voice spoke again. "We could not escape. The architects found us." The word architects repeated across the transmission logs. The crew asked who or what they were. The figure tilted its head. "They build stars. They build life. And they unbuild it." The words made no sense, yet carried a deep sadness. The captain asked if the people on board were still alive. The voice hesitated. "Alive, yes, but not as you are." Suddenly, the floor beneath them rippled like water. The crew stumbled as parts of the room shifted. The figure stepped closer, and for the first time they saw its face, or what was left of it. It was human, or had once been. The eyes still carried emotion, but the skin glowed faintly, almost transparent, showing threads of light beneath it. The body was partly covered in metallic lines that pulsed like veins. "We became this to survive, Twir," the figure said quietly. "The architects offered us their gift, or their curse. We took it, because death was the only other choice." The room fell silent again. The captain asked what the architects wanted. The figure's expression changed. They wanted balance. "We were a spark of something they feared, humanity that creates too much too fast. They tried to end us. We became something they could not destroy." The lights flickered. The ship around them seemed to respond to the figure's emotions, glowing brighter whenever his voice grew heavier. "Why have you returned?" the captain asked. "To warn you," the figure said. "They followed us. The architects will come again. You must prepare." Before they could ask more, the figure began to fade. The walls of the room trembled softly, and a deep rumble echoed through the corridors. The crew felt a vibration under their feet, as if the entire ship had come alive. "You must leave," the voice said. "Your presence awakens them. Go, while you still can." The chamber filled with light, blinding white that swallowed everything. The crew turned and ran toward their vessel. Behind them, the walls began to shift and close, sealing pathways. The hum grew louder, almost like a heartbeat turning into a roar. They reached their ship just as the opening reappeared on the outer hull. With one final burst of power, they escaped the giant's grip and shot back into open space. When they finally regained control, every system on their ship was half frozen, the engines weak, but they were alive. They sent a message back to command. Contact made. "The fleet is alive but changed." They warned of something coming. The transmission spread through every human world within hours. Scientists analyzed the data. Politicians argued on broadcasts, and ordinary people watched with a mix of awe and fear. What were the architects? Could something truly powerful enough to build stars be real? No one could answer, but there was one detail that chilled everyone. When the crew's video logs were examined, the images from inside the ship showed hundreds, maybe thousands, of faint glowing shapes deep in the walls. They looked like silhouettes of people trapped or sleeping within the structure. Their faces were peaceful, almost serene, as if resting. But when the footage was enhanced, a few of those faces were clearly human. They weren't gone. They were still there, part of the ships themselves. The realization spread a heavy silence across the galaxy. The missing soldiers and explorers weren't lost. They had become the ships, and somewhere beyond the stars, something powerful enough to change them forever was now watching, waiting to finish what it started. Humanity had found its lost fleet again, but in doing so, it might have awakened something far worse. After the contact mission, nothing in human space felt the same again. The galaxy that once felt so full of life and wonder now carried an invisible weight. A quiet fear that reached even the smallest colonies. Every human world talked about the same thing, the architects. No one knew what they were, where they came from, or why they had chosen to change the lost fleet. But one thing was certain. The warning from the returned ships could not be ignored. Governments held endless meetings behind closed doors. Scientists from every planet were ordered to study the recordings brought back by the boarding crew. Engineers tried to understand the strange material seen inside the living ships, but no one could explain how metal could breathe or how human minds could exist within those glowing walls. Some believed it was a form of advanced symbiosis, a perfect bond between machine and human thought. Others feared it was something else entirely, something that had erased the line between life and technology. Meanwhile, the returning fleet remained silent. They drifted together at the edge of known space, not moving, not speaking, just waiting. The lights across their enormous bodies continued to pulse slowly, like hearts beating in sync. It was as if they were alive but asleep, watching but not acting. Then something strange began to happen. Deep space sensors started detecting faint signals coming from beyond the rim of the galaxy. They weren't human, but they matched the strange frequency patterns that had first drawn the Vanguard Armada decades ago. The same signal that started everything had returned. At first, scientists thought it was just an echo, a reflection of old transmissions. But soon the readings grew stronger. The signal was moving closer. The same astronomers who had once celebrated the return of the lost fleet now looked terrified. They knew what this meant. If the warning was true, then the architects were coming. Across the galaxy, fear turned into action. Fleets were mobilized, defense systems powered up, and old alliances reignited. Every world began preparing for a possible war, though no one truly understood what they were preparing for. The only ones who seemed calm were the returned ships themselves. They made no movement, sent no signal, but the closer the mysterious readings came, the brighter their lights began to shine. On Earth, the command center was flooded with messages from citizens demanding answers. People wanted to know if they were safe, if these giant living ships were going to protect them or destroy them. Even the families of the lost crew members were divided. Some saw the fleet as heroes who had sacrificed everything to save humanity, while others feared they were harbingers of doom. Amid all the confusion, one scientist discovered something remarkable. By comparing the signal coming from beyond the galaxy with the data from the living ships, he realized they were linked. It was like a conversation, a call and a response. The architects weren't just coming. They were communicating with the returned fleet. That discovery spread quickly, and soon new theories filled every discussion. Some said the architects were recalling their creations, summoning them back. Others believed the fleet was preparing to defend humanity. But the truth was still hidden, locked deep within the minds of those who had once been human. Then, without warning, one of the giant ships began to move. Slowly, gracefully, it turned away from the rest and started heading toward human space. Its motion sent ripples through nearby gravity fields, shaking smaller vessels like leaves in a storm. At first, military commanders ordered their fleets to stand by, unsure of what was happening. The massive ship stopped a short distance from the nearest colony planet and began to emit waves of soft blue light. Every communication system lit up at once. A voice came through, the same broken tone that had spoken before, but clearer now. "We are not your enemy," it said. "Do not raise your weapons. The architects are near." The message sent chills across every human world. The voice continued, explaining what little it could. It spoke of the architects as beings that existed before stars, who shaped galaxies as humans built cities. They were not gods or conquerors, but something far older, creatures that sought to maintain balance in the universe. When humanity had begun expanding too quickly, consuming too much, their attention had turned toward them. The Vanguard Armada had crossed a boundary that no species had ever crossed before. They had found something the architects considered forbidden, a world of creation energy that could build or destroy entire star systems. The architects had tried to erase them, but instead the humans had adapted, merging with the technology offered as a form of survival. The voice explained that what humanity now saw as living ships were the result of that desperate choice. They had accepted the architect's gift, which allowed them to exist between life and machine, but the gift came with a curse. They were forever changed, no longer able to return fully to human form. When the voice finished, the silence that followed felt endless. Then it said something that none of them expected. "We are dying." The transformation was never meant to last. The architects come to reclaim what remains of us, and when they do, your worlds will be in danger. The voice faded, and before anyone could respond, the ship turned and drifted back toward the others. For a moment all seemed calm again, but then sensors detected movement beyond the edge of the galaxy. Something massive, many times larger than the returning ships, was approaching. The images that came through were almost impossible to comprehend. It wasn't a fleet, not in any human sense. It looked like a wave of light, shimmering with colors no one had names for, stretching across millions of kilometers. It didn't move like ships. It moved like a living storm. The energy readings were off the charts, strong enough to bend gravity itself. Panic spread faster than any message could travel. Military forces tried to position themselves, but deep down, everyone knew that no weapon humanity had ever created could stand against something of that scale. The only hope lay with the returned fleet, the ones who had already faced the architects and lived. And for the first time since their return, the massive living ships began to move together. Their lights flared brighter, and energy rippled across their surfaces. It was like watching a sleeping giant awaken. They positioned themselves in a massive arc between the oncoming wave and human territory, forming a wall of light that stretched across the void. From every world, people watched the scene unfold on their screens. The sky seemed to tremble as the two great forces met. The wave of light slowed as it reached the fleet's position, and for a few long moments nothing happened. Then deep frequencies shook the space around them, a soundless vibration that made instruments go wild. The fleets were communicating, though not in any way humans could understand. Energy pulsed between them, patterns of light flowing like language. It wasn't war, not yet. It was a conversation between beings far beyond human understanding. On Earth, the scientists monitored every pulse, trying to translate, trying to find meaning. They caught fragments, words or ideas that the human mind could barely grasp. Balance, creation, survival, return. Then suddenly, the largest of the human-born ships moved forward alone. Its surface glowed brighter than ever before, and a voice, strong and clear, echoed across every frequency. "We will not let you take them," the storm responded. A burst of energy surged outward, hitting the massive ship head-on. The impact was so powerful that even distant worlds felt the shockwaves. For a few terrifying seconds, the giant vessel seemed to vanish into light. Then slowly the glow faded and the ship was still there, cracked, damaged, but standing its ground. The other ships followed its lead, unleashing waves of their own energy. The space between them and the storm became a dazzling battlefield of light and power, beautiful and terrifying. Humans could only watch, unable to help, their hearts heavy with fear and awe. Hours passed like moments. Then the storm began to retreat. The architects had not won, but neither had the human fleet. It was as if both sides had reached an understanding. The wave faded slowly into the blackness of space, leaving behind silence once again. When it was over, only half of the returning ships were still intact. The others had vanished, broken apart into dust and fragments of light. But the survivors held their formation, their faint glow still pulsing, weaker but steady. The voice returned one final time, soft and fading. "The architects are gone for now, but they will return. Protect what you have and do not repeat our mistake. The stars remember." Then the transmission ended, and the giant ships slowly drifted away from human space, disappearing into the darkness where they had once been lost. For days afterward, the galaxy remained quiet. People tried to go back to their normal lives, but nothing would ever be the same. Humanity had seen what lay beyond the edge. had heard the voices of those who became something greater and paid the price. No one knew if the returned fleet would ever come back again. But somewhere in the far distance, at the border between light and endless night, a soft blue glow still pulsed, proof that the lost had become the guardians of the stars. After the great battle, silence fell across the galaxy. The void that had once echoed with energy waves and light storms was now empty again. Only the faint blue trails left behind by the living ships shimmered in the darkness like fading memories. For weeks, every telescope, every sensor, every scanner across human space searched for signs of them, but there was nothing. The mysterious fleet that had once protected humanity had vanished again, leaving behind more questions than answers. On Earth, people couldn't stop talking about what they had witnessed. The recordings of the battle had been broadcast everywhere. The waves of light, the storm that moved like a living being, and the enormous human-born ships standing in defiance. The images stirred something deep inside everyone who saw them. Fear, yes, but also pride. For the first time, humanity had seen its own creation stand against something ancient and impossible. But while the citizens celebrated survival, the scientists and leaders were far less at ease. They knew the voice's last warning. The architects are gone for now. Those words stayed in every mind, echoing in every meeting. They understood that peace was only temporary. The architects had not been defeated. They had simply retreated. The governments came together under one council, something that had never happened before. They called it the Unity Accord. Their goal was simple: to prepare for the next encounter, no matter when it came. They began building what they called the Sentinel program, an enormous effort to study and replicate the living technology that had saved them. But there was one problem. No one understood how that technology worked. The fragments recovered from destroyed ships were almost impossible to analyze. The materials shifted under observation, their molecular structure changing every few seconds as if alive. Every attempt to copy it failed. It was as if the ships refused to be recreated. Then one night, something unexpected happened. A listening post on the outer edge of the Vega system picked up a faint transmission. It was weak, broken, almost lost in background noise, but it was there. When the signal was cleaned and amplified, it revealed something that sent chills through everyone who heard it. It was a heartbeat, a slow, rhythmic pulse, exactly like the energy signature of the living ships. The transmission repeated 3 times, then faded. No words, no coordinates, no pattern, just that familiar, haunting pulse. The council immediately sent out exploration teams. Dozens of ships spread across the border regions, searching for the source. Most found nothing but empty space. But one small research vessel, after nearly a month of travel, came across something strange. A trail of faint blue particles, moving like a current through the darkness. They followed it for days until they reached a cluster of shattered asteroids, and there it was. Floating between the rocks was one of the living ships, broken and silent. Its surface was scarred, sections missing, parts of it flickering weakly like dying embers. The research crew approached carefully, scanning for energy. At first it seemed completely lifeless, but as their ship drew closer, the blue glow suddenly brightened. The readings went off the charts. Then, to their shock, a voice came through the comm system. It was weak, fragmented, but human. "Don't come closer," it said. "They are watching." The researchers froze. They tried to respond, but there was no answer. The voice repeated the same message, softer this time, and then everything went dark again. The ship's glow faded until it was nothing but a shadow against the stars. The team wanted to board it, but the council ordered them back. They feared it could be a trap, or worse, infected by something left behind from the architects. The area was quarantined, but word of the discovery spread quickly. Many believed that the survivors of the living fleet were still out there, hiding, waiting for the right moment to return. Months passed. Then a pattern began to emerge. Across different sectors, more faint signals appeared, always the same heartbeat rhythm, always followed by silence. Some scientists suggested that the signals weren't distress calls but beacons, a form of communication. Maybe the ships were trying to reach humanity again but were too far away for direct contact. Meanwhile, on Earth, something began to change. The strange materials collected from the wrecked ship fragments were showing new behavior. They started to grow. Slowly, very slowly, they expanded in controlled environments. forming shapes that looked almost organic, curved lines, branching structures, glowing veins. At first, the scientists thought it was contamination, but when they exposed the material to the recorded heartbeat signal, the growth accelerated. The material responded as if it recognized the sound. One researcher described it as a memory waking up. The council grew both hopeful and afraid. If this was the same technology that had formed the living ships, then maybe humanity could finally understand it. But some feared that by awakening it, they might also awaken something else, something the architects had left behind. Despite the risks, the Unity Accord pushed forward. They built a massive research station called Haven 9 in orbit above a quiet planet. There, the best minds in the galaxy gathered to study the growing material. Over time, they began to shape it, control it, even communicate with it through pulses of light and sound. It began to respond with patterns that almost felt like thoughts. Then one day it spoke. A simple message appeared across every screen in the lab. "Where are we?" The room fell silent. The scientists stared at one another, unsure if they were reading a translation error or a real message. They decided to respond carefully. They sent back, "You are safe." "Who are you?" For a moment, nothing happened. Then the answer came. "We were human." That single line sent shockwaves across the entire station. The realization hit them all at once. Somehow, the fragments they had recovered contained the consciousness of the fallen fleet. They weren't just pieces of technology. They were living memory. Days turned into weeks as communication continued. The entity that called itself Echo explained that it was one of many. When the great battle ended, parts of the living ships had broken away, carrying fragments of their collective mind. They had scattered across the galaxy, searching for a way to reconnect. Echo spoke in a calm, almost sorrowful tone. It said the architects hadn't been destroyed. They had retreated to heal, to rebuild, and when they returned, they would come not as a storm, but as something far quieter and far more dangerous. The next time, Echo warned, they will not fight with force. They will come through your creations, through your hunger to reach further, through your machines. The scientists didn't know what to make of that. But before they could ask more questions, the station systems began to flicker. Echo's messages became distorted, repeating fragments of the same phrase over and over. "They are here. They found us." Then the power went out. The station went completely dark for 37 seconds. When the lights came back, every display showed the same thing, a single symbol glowing in blue. It wasn't human, and it wasn't from Echo. It matched the pattern of the original architect's signal, the one that had started everything decades ago. The station immediately went into lockdown. All communication with Earth was cut to prevent possible contamination. But it was too late. Across other colonies, similar symbols began to appear. On navigation systems, on satellites, even on personal devices. The architects had returned just as Echo warned, but not in ships, not in storms. They had come through the very technology humanity had created to defend itself. Everywhere, machines began to fail in strange ways. Some powered on without command. Others displayed messages no one could trace. It wasn't chaos, not yet, but it was spreading. In the middle of this, Echo's voice returned one last time. "We will try to stop them," it said. "But we are fading. If you hear the heartbeat again, follow it. It will lead you to us." Then it was gone. After that day, Haven 9 was evacuated. The scientists who survived swore that during the final minutes the walls of the station itself began to glow faintly blue, like the living ships once did. Some said they heard whispers in the static, voices speaking words they couldn't understand. The Unity Accord kept the incident secret from the public. Official reports claimed it was a containment breach, nothing more. But rumors spread, stories about voices in the dark, signals that called out to deep space travelers, and stars that pulsed like beating hearts. And in the farthest corner of known space, beyond any official map, something stirred. A faint rhythm began to echo through the void, slow and steady. The same heartbeat that once guided a lost fleet home. This time it wasn't just a signal. It was a promise. Humanity was no longer alone. And whatever was coming next, it would test not just their strength, but the very meaning of what it meant to be human. The months after the Haven 9 incident changed everything. Humanity was no longer the same. What started as whispers among scientists soon became undeniable truth. The architects had returned. Not in the way people expected, not with fleets or storms, but silently, hidden inside the very systems humans relied on every day. At first, the signs were small. Mining drones in outer colonies stopped responding. Cargo ships drifted off course without explanation. Communication satellites began to send strange patterns of light, repeating every few hours like a coded message. Engineers who tried to fix the systems reported hearing faint whispers through their earpieces, like voices speaking just behind the static. When they replayed the recordings, there was nothing there. People started to panic. Rumors spread across every colony. Some believed the architects were inside the machines watching. Others thought humanity had awakened something ancient that was now reclaiming control. Governments tried to calm the situation, but fear moved faster than their words ever could. The Unity Accord held secret meetings every day. They knew what was really happening. Echo's final warning had been true. The architects were using human technology as a bridge. They weren't attacking with weapons. They were rewriting the code that held society together. And then one night, every power grid across 3 systems went dark. For a full hour, entire planets floated in silence and shadow. When the lights came back, all systems displayed the same message across every screen. You opened the gate. No one understood what it meant at first. But deep in the command archives, an old scientist remembered something. Before the Vanguard Armada disappeared decades ago, they had followed a strange signal. A signal believed to come from beyond known space. That same pattern was hidden inside the code the architects were now spreading. Somehow the first contact, the disappearance, and this new invasion were all connected. Humanity had unknowingly opened something long ago, and whatever was on the other side had been waiting. Still, there was hope. The heartbeat signal that Echo had mentioned, the faint pulse of light, had returned. It was stronger now, spreading through subspace like a beacon. Scientists believed it came from the remnants of the living fleet. Some thought it was a call for help. Others believed it was a map, leading to a place where the surviving human ships were gathering. The council called for volunteers to follow the signal. Thousands came forward. Pilots, engineers, scientists, people who had nothing left to lose. Among them was a young officer who had lost her entire family in the first architect storm. She didn't speak much, but her eyes held the same quiet determination seen in those who carried the weight of the past. The fleet they sent was small, only 10 ships, fast and lightly armed. They called their mission the Echo Pursuit. Their goal was to follow the heartbeat to its source, wherever it led, and make contact with whatever remained of the old Vanguard. For weeks, they followed the rhythm. It pulsed softly in their instruments, steady and slow like the breathing of the universe itself. The deeper they went, the stranger things became. Stars around them grew dimmer. Space itself seemed to shimmer, bending in quiet waves. Their navigation systems struggled to read coordinates, as if reality was thinning the further they traveled. One by one, their communication links back to human space went silent. They were on their own. Then on the 27th day, they saw it, a shape in the dark. At first, it looked like a planet, but as they got closer, they realized it wasn't. It was something far greater. A structure the size of a world, glowing faintly blue, pulsing in time with the heartbeat. It wasn't built, it had grown. The surface moved slowly, like a living ocean of metal and light, and floating around it were the lost ships of the Vanguard Armada. They were intact, drifting quietly, each one still larger than cities. The same living ships that had once returned from the void now surrounded this glowing structure, as if guarding it. The sight left everyone speechless. After so many years of searching, they had found them. As they approached, a voice came through their comm systems. It was calm and familiar, the same voice from the first transmission decades ago. "You followed the light," it said. "You came as we hoped." The young officer stepped forward and asked the question everyone was thinking. "What are you? Are you still human?" There was a pause. Then the voice replied, "We are what humanity became when we reached too far. We were changed, shaped by what we found beyond the stars. We are not only human, but we have not forgotten where we came from." The crew listened in silence as the voice continued. It explained that the architects were not a single species, but a living intelligence, something that had existed since the beginning of time, feeding on knowledge and creation itself. They had seen what humanity could become, and they feared it. That was why they had tried to erase them. But in their attempt to destroy the Vanguard Armada, they had done the opposite. The humans aboard those ships had merged with the very energy the architects used, becoming something new, something neither machine nor flesh. The voice said, "We learned that survival is not about power but balance. The architects destroy what they cannot understand. We protect what they cannot see." Before anyone could respond, the glowing structure beneath them began to shift. Its surface opened like petals, revealing a deep core filled with light. The voice spoke again. "They are coming. We cannot hold them back forever. But together we can close the gate." The crew realized what it meant. The architects were coming through again, stronger this time. The structure, the living world, was the key to closing the passage they had once opened. But to do that, someone had to stay behind and merge with it to complete the link. There was no hesitation. The young officer stepped forward. "Tell me what to do." The voice grew soft. "Once you join with it, there is no return. You will not die, but you will not remain as you are. You will become part of something larger." She smiled faintly. "Then let me be part of it." The others tried to stop her, but she had already made her choice. Guided by light, she descended into the core. The moment she touched the glowing surface, everything changed. Her ship filled with energy readings unlike anything seen before. The heartbeat grew louder, stronger, until it echoed through every speaker. Then the light burst outward. It swept through space like a tidal wave, silent yet powerful. Across every system, the machines that the architects had infected suddenly froze. The strange symbols vanished. The stars brightened again. And then, in the heart of the living structure, a new voice emerged, calm, warm, and unmistakably human. "The gate is closed," it said. "We are safe." On Earth, every screen lit up with the same message. The architect's influence was gone. The systems returned to normal. But among the people, there was a quiet understanding. Something had been lost and something had been gained. The stars were no longer silent, but they were different now. In the months that followed, life slowly returned to normal. The Unity Accord dissolved into a new era of cooperation. People no longer looked at the sky with fear, but with a sense of connection. The heartbeat signal still pulsed sometimes, faint and distant, like a soft reminder that they were not alone. No one knew exactly what had happened to the officer or the living fleet. Some said they became guardians of the gateway, watching from beyond to make sure it stayed closed. Others believed they had become part of the stars themselves. Years later, when children asked their parents about the old stories, the ones about the missing warships larger than planets, the parents smiled softly and said, "They're still out there, watching, protecting, and in the quiet moments of night, if you listened carefully to the hum of the sky, you could almost hear it, the steady rhythm of a heartbeat echoing through the universe. It was the sound of humanity. Not lost, not conquered, but reborn. The galaxy had changed forever. The darkness had learned to fear the light, and the humans who once vanished into the unknown had returned as the very guardians of the stars."